I know Jennifer has a lot to tell us today. Jennifer Hark Dietz is the new CEO of PATH, which is People Assisting the Homeless. Jennifer is a 15-year advocate for the homeless and for veterans and for mental health services. She is a licensed clinical social worker who, before coming to PATH, worked at the Department of Veterans Affairs, Greater LA. And as CEO of PATH, Jennifer guides the organization's statewide initiatives, working alongside 900 staff who share a commitment to setting up permanent solutions to homelessness that are more immediate and affordable. And I know, as the chair of Mission and Outreach, homelessness is an incredibly important issue, not only to our church, but also to the community. PATH, for those of you who don't know, began here at WPC in 1983 with a community letter that was sent out by Claire and Reverend Charles Orr, calling some 60 community members together to help the homeless population. Fast forward to 2022, where PATH has increased its operations to $140 million and expanded its operation to reach thousands and thousands of our unhoused brothers and sisters. Today, Jennifer will talk to us about PATH's strategic plan. We are so grateful that she can share with us today and that she has agreed to come and talk to us. I think so many of us sometimes feel overwhelmed by this issue, so the idea of a plan, I think, is so vital to our understanding of how we move forward in our congregation. So let's welcome Jennifer.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. As was mentioned, this has been my entire career. And I will say, since day one, right out of grad school, it was a crisis. It's even more so now. So I'll talk a little bit about that and how we got here. It's a small group, so pretty, informal. If you all want to ask questions as I'm going, I'm, perfectly, that works great. So it was already shared a little bit about where we started right here, which it's amazing to come back and be able to share where we are today. PATH is one of the largest nonprofit homeless service providers and housing developers in the state. And much of that has grown because the need has grown so much. So, in Los Angeles alone, there's over 60,000 people who are living unsheltered. That's a lot of people who need a home. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we really have grown because we've been asked to take on things that often were gaps in certain communities. So starting here in Los Angeles, we now go all the way from Sacramento down to San Diego. And we're serving about 25,000 people a year. So when I first started in PATH 8 years ago, we had 125 staff, I think, and now we have 900 actually in the door. If we were fully staffed, it would be 1,200. So pretty big growth within the last few years. There we go. So we always like to show just where that letter actually was and some press. And of course, Claire's here with us today. But, just that vision of bringing the stakeholders together. Many agencies that started in the 80s were faith-based. And I think what was really unique about PATH was that it, of course, drawed upon the amazing, faith that everyone has here. But it also said we need the businesses involved. We need the elected officials involved. We need everyone involved to solve homelessness. And that's still true today. And so I think that's really one of the big tenets that I draw away from it, is that it opened the doors for everyone to be really part of that solution. Oops, I went over here. There we go. So this is some of our impact. Just, you can kind of see the numbers. We like to break it down by region so you really know what we're doing on a regional basis. So when you see a number of 25,000 and then you see a house number of 1,900 plus, The reason for that is we still need more permanent exits, and I'll talk about that, what that means. But it means a lot of those people are receiving outreach services, touch points. We're in the process of getting them into a home of their own. And then roughly about 5,000 of those are also already in a home, but need the wraparound services that we provide to be stable. So could think of that like a care coordination model. And then, of course, our supportive housing side. So in 2007, Path and Joel, our previous CEO, was really, really innovative in thinking about, how do we add to the pipeline? Not just wait for some other developers to build housing, but if it's housing for the people we serve, and these are evidence-based practices, let's build it ourselves. So since 2007, we have also grown that side of the organization significantly, and particularly in the last 2 years. Jake said that might happen, so I know what to do if it closes. But anyway, so we've grown that side as well. So these are actually apartment communities that are flourishing. So people are living there with wraparound services, activities. All of our communities have teaching kitchens, and I'm going to show some pictures so you can really see what it looks like. Here's a little snapshot of our regions and some of our locations there. So Path Sacramento and Path Orange County, we actually started during COVID. Our Path Orange County location, we opened March 31st, 2020. I will say, living in Los Angeles, it was much easier to do because you could drive to Orange County. Remember when flying, we were terrified to fly. So in Sacramento, when we opened in May of 2020, we did everything virtually. We even had somebody up there who was living there take their computer and tour the office space because we weren't able to, fly and then go back to work. So anyway, it was definitely a learning experience, but it was we were called upon because the crisis was here, the pandemic was here, and now our Orange County site in particular is fastly climbing to be our third largest region. So. Very exciting. I'm going to focus a little bit on Los Angeles because you all are from Los Angeles. So these are just some of our key programs. So outreach means directly going out into the street and engaging with folks. And that's a little bit of a different model. So in 2002, when Path opened the Path Mall, the idea was a one-stop shop. People could come in. And that still is very, very successful, but there's a group of folks who will never come in without the rapport and the relationship that our outreach workers build with them. So we had to change our model a little bit to actually go out to them. And then once you build that rapport, that hope, they can come in for services, and we can eliminate some of the barriers like transportation in LA that we all have. We are the outreach provider in all of the transit system in Los Angeles, so every single metro line, every bus station, Union Square, all of that, we are the metro provider. We have about 100 individuals who are operating in and out of the metro system, very closely aligned with the metro security team. And the reason that's grown so much, it was a pilot program with one team of 5, and it grew because the constituents, the riders, said that they felt safer because they knew that Path to them started to symbol safety. Because they could go to a Path staff member, even if they were not unhoused, and ask for something or say, I'm feeling uncomfortable, or I think somebody over here needs help. So it's just really wonderful when you see those type of partners, like the Metro, MTA, that say, I want to be part of the solution too, and I'm actually going to build out my infrastructure instead of just adding more security guards or something like that. So we've served over 3,000 people on the Metro lines just in the last 2 years alone, so pretty significant. And then interim or bridge housing. So this is kind of where you can go right from directly being unhoused on the street. It's meant to be short term. I say meant to be because sometimes it's a little longer than anticipated because there's no permanent housing exits, or not enough, I should say. So they're built, though, with this short-term idea in mind. There's congregate and non-congregate, so you either live in a big kind of community setting, or some have their own individual rooms. And we operate over 1,000 interim housing beds in Los Angeles. Housing navigation and placement. So this is a huge part of our work. So in 2017, we realized that our case managers were really having a difficult time navigating the relationship with landlords. So they're very individual focused, right? I'm a social worker. I'm thinking of the person in front of me. that landlord's also thinking of, their bottom line, making sure that their unit is well cared for. So we actually said to the case manager, I want you to focus on the individual, focus on the participant, and we built out a team to focus on the landlord, to provide that customer service so that we could get more people saying yes to renting to individuals who may previously have been unhoused. And we are now the provider in all of LA County doing that landlord engagement program. So we have over 2,500 case managers across LA County from hundreds of organizations who are looking in our system, and it's called Lease Up LA. It's an online web system, kind of like Zillow. So they're looking in our system for units, just like any of us would look for an apartment unit. They have drop downs. They can say, hey, I'd like to live in this area. It's right by where I go to the doctor, or I really want to be close to transit, or I want a ground floor room. So we've actually met with Zillow a number of times, and we developed our own user-friendly application and are launching that. We launched that in 2017 at a countywide level. And then, of course, we provide a ton of support, case management directly out there. And during COVID, this really changed. It went from, you were doing a house call and you were talking about maybe some longer-term plans and things people were interested in, to bringing them food and hygiene items and doing general welfare checks, because many of our participants are so vulnerable. And that first year before that vaccine was available, we did what we called the knock, drop, and walk. I always get it confused, but basically you knock on the door, stand back to give people space, leave the food there and just check from the door. But many people would not have had the food that they needed during that time. So some of these pictures, sometimes, it's funny because someone asked me, since I've only been CEO for a few months, they were like, what has changed? And some of it is the meetings have changed a little bit. I do a lot more elected official meetings, I would say. So this is Councilmember Bonin, actually at our Marina Del Rey site. He came in to speak with some residents. And then this is our team doing the point time count. So in our sector, funding from the federal government is determined by one single night a year. So every year there is a count of the number of people that you find out on the street. And it's a great opportunity actually for community members to get involved, because it's kind of an easy entry point, let me talk to some folks who might know a little bit about this. Let me see what this really looks like. So this was actually just in February of this year. Our team came together over at our Madison campus and did some counts around there. But it's critically important to us because if you undercount, your funding changes. If you overcount, your funding changes. And yet people don't know that the lines of where they live. So we do it really to support them. Yeah, come on.
I was just going to add it, this very room, it's the place for the Westwood area count starts here.
Oh, I love that.
A lot of UCLA students. And
great.
Others, and it's sometimes like filled to capacity because you need a lot of counters.
Yes, yeah. Has anyone done the count before? Oh, love it. Great.
And this was also the room in which the first meeting for PATH occurred.
Aww.
December 7th.
That's great. Yeah, so I'd love to talk about the point in time count because I don't think everyone truly always understands the importance of it. And my hope on advocacy side would be that we don't fund that way in the future, but we got to change the federal government first.
No problem.
So how did we get here? So, when we look at looking at 1983, right, and talking about what folks were thinking about, that people needed support. The motto, a hand up, right? Not a handout. Honestly, in the point in time count in 2020, 59% were still entering homelessness due to an economic reason. So we are still in a place where the economy plays such a critical role. And that can be really hard because it can look like it's always mental health or it's always substance use. But often those things are exacerbated when someone is on the street. So one of the key things for me, and as I've thought about a lot taking over this role, because I had a lot of time to think about it, we had about a year of transition, which was great, because when you have somebody who's CEO for 25 years, you really need that transition. But I thought about it and I thought, what do I want to leave for my kids? I have a 6 and 9-year-old. And what I want to really work on is prevention. I really want to make it to where that trauma doesn't happen in the first place, because so many times when I talk to people, they start using as a coping mechanism, or they might have had some anxiety and depression, but now when you're not sleeping because you're scared or you're cold or you're hungry, it is really exacerbated, and there's not enough services to go around. So 11% of the people that we're serving out of that 25,000 I mentioned are prevention. That means things, it could be, they lost their job, could be their unemployment benefits run out. This eviction moratorium, terrified about what's going to happen. But we know what works. So let's keep them in their home. It's cheaper, it's more affordable, and it reduces trauma. So that's a big thing that we're kind of looking at. Because you have to make a lot of money to live in Los Angeles, right? $41 an hour.
Shocking.
So this is our average rent.
$42.
42, yeah. And it's a lot. It's almost $2,200 a month. And you can't work a lot of places and make that, right? A lot of times that's a career. Even at our organization, we're looking at pay equity and how do we support people to live and work in the communities they choose? I think it's a real challenge. The other thing we're really trying to do is normalize and reframe what's called sometimes co-living or shared housing. Anybody else live with someone else? I definitely do, right? I'm married. I couldn't live by myself. Right? So let's normalize it. You live with a best friend, you live with a partner. So we're really trying to work on that too, because a lot of times it's this idea we want our own, place, but we don't normalize that a lot of people as they get older are living with, a loved one. So we're making a lot of roommate connections. And so that it helps stabilize them too as they get older. It can be really isolating. So that's another thing we hear. People are out on the street, they have a community. And that can seem kind of odd to those of us that are housed, like, what's that look like? But there's safety, there's hierarchies. And then you put them into a unit all by themselves and it can be very, very isolating. And so people will say, well, why do they keep going back to that encampment? Or why are they bringing people inside? And it's community, which is something we're all searching for. So a lot of this is, talking about this with the people we serve, but also looking at policy shifts, which I'll talk about later. And I mentioned there's a lack of critical access to health and mental health services, substance use services. It's something that the county is really looking at as well, is, how do we partner more mental health services with the programs we already have going? In addition to substance use beds, right? So somebody says, I want to be clean. It can be very hard to find a bed that day. And we know that when folks want to come in, we need to say yes then, because the next day is a new day and something could have changed. It also hurts our relationship if we can't provide something we've been talking about a long time when they're ready for that service. Any questions so far? Yeah.
That last slide, the stat about the the equivalent of $42 an hour of work rent. That's average in LA County.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing that if you looked at the average in the Antelope Valley, the Lancaster Palmdale area, it would be a lot less than it is around here. My question really is a bigger one, but I know there's some efforts to try to build housing for some folks because just the cost of housing. What the paper, it's been talking about $700,000 a unit recently. That's been the reality of what building homeless housing units is costing. So that's got to be part of the solution, is just getting the cost down and getting folks where it's actually affordable to build housing, because we have such a massive problem. But that stat is really jaw-dropping.
Jaw-dropping, absolutely.
Yeah. Let me just really quick, and then I'll come. I think one of the key things too is, so coming from the veteran community, this is the community they want to live in, right? Where we're sitting today because of proximity to the VA. So the Antelope Valley, Palmdale, Lancaster, where we actually do have an office out there and serve a lot of folks out there, but it's very far often from what they feel like is their health service or their community. What we found is that families, it's a much easier place for families because they can reestablish a community, schools, start to build those relationships, and usually they're healthier physically than our individuals. So sometimes too, we're looking at that, like what makes the most sense for somebody to really stabilize and thrive? And then I'm gonna talk a little bit about housing development for sure, because that is it. Driving that cost down is key.
Part of the same question, I keep hearing about empty office buildings.
Yes.
I wonder if any of the CEOs who built those office buildings are thinking about donating or in any way making that available even for temporary solutions.
Yes, so I love that comment. I love that idea. As soon as Babies R Us went out, I literally said, let's just go to all the Babies R Us's. I mean, I drive by one every day. It's still open, and I think it went out 2018 or 19, you know? So I think interim is a wonderful idea for those sites because they have parking, they already have electricity. It's zoning issues, so we got to work on the zoning. But it is being looked at. A lot of the mini malls, you know, they're kind of called, the strip malls, they haven't been able to come back since COVID. So big box stores went out, but now we're seeing, you know, a lot more open. So it's definitely something we're looking at, but also looking at policy change so that it's a little more flexible.
It kind of goes on the same question. Policy changes, from my understanding, when they target an affordable rent, it's the average rent or the median rent. So like say you have something like the Sportsman's Lodge in Studio City, which you're changing and you're going to provide some quote unquote affordable housing. If your average rent in the area is like $2,000, that's not really creating affordable housing. So policy-wise, is that true? And then what efforts are being done? Because that's the problem. You know, you don't have $2,000 a month. You don't have $1,500 a month. So isn't some of it policy-wise like inaccurately saying what's really affordable?
Yeah, so affordability looks at your area median income levels.
Yeah.
And affordability has a big range. So it could be all the way from 30% area median income, which might mean you're making as a single individual, you know, 10 to 20,000 a year. Very little amount, but you can also go all the way up. You can do 80%. You can even go to 100% and still kind of work the system a little bit around affordability. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing because we're adding affordable to our pipeline. I'm distinctive of that because permanent supportive housing, which is kind of what Ventures started out doing, is what you were referencing, where it's building, you know, 700,000 a unit. But it has the wraparound services. So it's really for folks who are much more vulnerable, highly acute. Affordable, adding that to our pipeline, doesn't have that same service level need. It might be for individuals who are in that working level, don't make that amount of money, but are pretty stable. And that's newer to Path Ventures. We have some units that are that, but I think that's about homeless prevention. So I think it's very much aligned mission-wise. Because we do need more units that are truly affordable. So I think I have a slide coming up on that. So this is just some more stats that, you know, you can kind of see. So when it says 500,000 unit deficit in LA County for all income levels, that means even building at the high level is needed in LA, but not only at that level. And LA has kind of focused more on that luxury housing. So we need to make sure that we're building it at all of those area median income levels. And then this statistic at the bottom is also from the 2020 point in time count. So what that meant was every day our sector was housing 207 people, which is incredible. But 227 were falling into homelessness. So when I started and said prevention is so key for me, and when I think about my future in this role, is because we're never going to stop it by just building. We can't build our way out. So we've got to do both, right? We've got to work on prevention and work on building.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I know 25% are also kids from foster care that transition without a family.
Yeah.
So we're part of, it's a lot to start with us. And
Yeah.
to sadly.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes with children.
And lots of
time.
with children.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, and I think the sector actually recognized the need for that specialty service for what they call transition age youth, which is that 18 to 25 group. So there are providers who just focus on that group. We do some work with them, but yeah, it's pretty new. I think
It is
last
new.
5-ish
Which
years,
is great.
which is good, but it's a totally different population, and you have an opportunity to really do a lot of great work so that they don't perpetuate that cycle of poverty.
Obviously, you know, massive, complicated, systemic issues all around that homelessness, you know, has as a root cause, so it's impossible to solve it very easily. There's a really interesting article in the LA Times this morning that was basically asking the question, can you be a Christian and still have an NIMBY instinct?
And still have what? NIMBY.
NIMBY.
Not in my backyard.
And it was a really, really well done article, but that kind of speaks to this as well. It's right at the core of this. It's just so hard to build units. People
Yeah.
love the policy, don't want it near them.
Yeah.
And everybody feels that way.
Yeah. For someone who does a ton of community engagement work, and it's hard too sometimes, I will say, at the site that I showed earlier with Councilmember Bonin, that particular site is right next to a residential community. And I think it's going to be an amazing site. It's only 33 units, so it's, it was an old motel, so it was being used for transient use, before. I think what's been challenging and being honest with those neighbors who they said no, then they said yes, you build a relationship, you're on the phone, you're there if there's a crisis, but sometimes this length of time to get it to the finish line, I think, they're tired. I just did another community meeting with them on Thursday, and they're like, that construction fence has been there now for 18 months. I'm thinking, it's true, and a lot of that's there's nothing we can do about that. I mean, Con knows, he's in all of our real estate meetings. Some of this is LA City permitting. Some of this is funding, so I want to get to, my hope would be to get to a place where people say yes, then you can move a little quicker, because I try to also recognize if that was going on across the street from my house, right? Like, I would want to know the timelines. I'd want to make sure you were on track. I'd want to know if there was a backlog for some reason. So we try to be really communicative, but I think sometimes our system also hurts our efforts. So it's just important to recognize that.
The financing is so tough.
Yes.
It takes so many players to come together.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about this. So, right, we know these are solutions. Interim is kind of you're going to be able to put somebody in today. It could be even placing in motels. Our sector uses motels a ton because there's not enough brick and mortar. But we don't want to do that without also continuing to build permanent solutions. And when we say permanent supportive housing, that's what I was sharing with the wraparound services. And then permanently affordable, to your question, is making sure it's really at the lower area median income, so that someone maybe with a fixed income, because older adults are one of the largest growing homeless populations. And we know that with Social Security, they're going to have, many people, a fixed income. We want to make sure they can afford it and thrive. So this just kind of is an example, kind of breaks it out. This is one of our supportive housing developments in Winnetka, which is up in the valley. So when you drive by, you're never going to know that is for folks who are formerly homeless. And what I always tell somebody is the second that they sign that lease, they're no longer homeless. So it's really important for us to recognize that. These are our neighbors. And likely they were living in our community before. So another myth is, people are coming to California, it's Hollywood, it's so warm here. Over 70% of people are actually experiencing homelessness in the area where they last lived. So they have ties, they have connections. So it's important to recognize that too. Not to say that we don't have some folks coming in and out, but that's true in every community, not just here in Los Angeles. So here are some of just the other sites, just some names so you kind of can see. A Bridge Home was an interim housing kind of campaign that Mayor Garcetti did. So he actually challenged each council member to put interim housing in their district. And we operate quite a number of those sites throughout the city. But that was really the first time that we had seen a mayor say, you need to have short-term solutions and long-term solutions. So those were done under emergency declaration for what was anticipated to be 3 years, but we know that they're still needed, so they're still all in operation. And then this is our beautiful Path Metro Villas campus, which we actually are going to show a video so you can all see it. But it's really remarkable when you see what can come together. So this is the town square. It's named after one of our board members, Brian Tucker, the Tucker Town Square. Actually Claire and Charles have their name on this building, and soon Eileen and Tom. But it's a great way to just honor, folks who are committed to the solutions. And then they look up the names and they're like, I want to get involved in PATH, because you can see the names often from the 101 freedom.
Incentive. That's a great picture.
So, the key for us is when we help somebody make it home, we want to make sure that we provide those wraparound services. And it looks different for every individual. Sometimes it's intensive, and we might be linking them to the Department of Mental Health who comes on site regularly. We might be bringing in a nurse that comes on site. And sometimes it's just about getting their basic needs met. How do I grocery shop again? How do I budget? How do I take care of my health proactively instead of reactively? So our team really does everything. They host barbecues because that can be a great way to engage. Sometimes, I don't know you all, but sometimes if I see the doctor calling, right, I don't necessarily want to answer. So people say the same with the case manager. So it's like, but if there's a barbecue, then maybe we can have that nice connection and then schedule that appointment. So it's really about just helping people stabilize. So our retention rate is very high. So most of the people living in our buildings, over 85%, they're going to stay there long term. Some, of course, will no longer need our support and we'll help them transition. And then some might need more support. But over 85% of folks are actually going to stay long term. So this is really your neighbors, right? This is their long-term home. So we talked a little bit about Path Ventures. This is another beautiful site in Inglewood. We have 16 sites across Los Angeles County and then many more throughout the state. Let's see.
This does not address the addicts and the mental health sufferers who are littering, as one of our wonderful mayoral candidates likes to say, the streets. I think that's just a horrible word. Talk about human beings littering the streets. They are there, and what can be done for them? These are healthy people who want to get back on their feet, for the most part.
Well,
Not all.
not all. So I will say that outreach I was talking about is really important because that relationship, most of the folks who go into here are either coming from interim housing or directly street homeless. So our Path Madison site that I've said we'll show a video on, we actually did a scan right around it, which had some large encampments. People didn't want to go into interim. They wanted to go directly into their own home. And that's possible. Sometimes, interim housing, living with a bunch of other people might not be the best bet.
Sure.
But I think what's important is that there are mental health services on the street. We need more of them, significantly more. I was sharing earlier with a gentleman that LA City is actually doing something pretty interesting. They are looking at taking away all the nonviolent crisis calls from LAPD and putting them with a mental health team.
Oh yeah, I've read about that.
Yeah,
I've heard about that.
and I think that's something that needed to happen many, many years ago because our law enforcement is not set up to be that first responder for homelessness. And many of them tell you that. They are not trained. Before COVID, I was actually working with one of the commanders on a training, an actual, like a live, we were gonna kind of, have staff play different roles so that they could have kind of a training on what to do when you interact with somebody, or they could be afraid when they see the LAPD uniform, and how do we kind of normalize that? And that of course fell by the wayside during COVID, but this advocacy that a lot of agencies have been doing is, LAPD can't respond, especially if someone's in a mental health crisis, if they haven't been violent, because they're not going to have that same rapport, they're not going to have that same training. So I'm really excited to see where that ends up. It's been really successful. It's based off of a model in Eugene, Oregon called Cahoots, and it's been super successful. So a lot of agencies or organizations throughout California are trying to adopt something like that, because what we're doing right now by criminalizing is not working.
No.
Really quick, I'll just say too, a couple of these sites also are dedicated towards individuals with a severe mental health need. So it's called Mental Health Services Act funding, and it does provide that robust wraparound service that's needed. So we have one in Del Rey, some of our beds at the Winnetka site I was sharing, even in Vermont Villas. So, you might have a few beds there that are really for folks who are high in need. And then, question in the back.
Like you just said, I have a family member, two family members that live in Eugene, Oregon, and right in front of a church, there was a kind of an incident, and I watched the whole thing happen. About 4 people came, they were dressed kind of in a just normal outfit, and maybe one of them was armed, I don't know, but the whole thing they dealt with the situation, and it didn't look as, law enforcement,
Yeah.
and it really worked.
They de-escalate.
Yeah, right.
When you see 4 people armed with bags.
Sure.
Any of us kind of go, whoa.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think it is an unarmed crisis response. So nobody's actually armed, but of course they're connected to LAPD or connected to the Oregon Police if they are needed. So that's great you were able to witness that. In Redondo Beach, where I live, they actually have a mental health clinician that goes out with them if they get the calls and approaches first, which is like a hybrid model because you're still coming in the police car, which can escalate a situation. But I think, what's being in this for over 15 years, what's interesting is, we know what works. We know, we've seen, we share. The system takes a little while to catch on, but I think because the crisis is so vast and so many people are raising their voice saying, I want to be part of the solution, but I need to see something different. So we're seeing some real trends change. So thanks for sharing that. So I mentioned a lot of these services earlier. So we really believe that with housing and services, we can end this problem. I won't go back into all of those, but I'll start to go into some of our strategic plan and kind of where we came from on that. So there we go. So in 2020, we decided, the world was changing and we said, we have to figure this out too. We have to make a plan that is livable, breathable, that really feels right for us as an organization as we grow. And we really focused on, as I've shared today, just 3 kind of core things. We want to help more people make it home. We want to provide more services, and we want to develop more permanent homes for the pipeline. And then in order to do that, what do we need to do to be successful? So we hired a consultant and actually did lots of surveys. So over 300 staff surveys, then we had stakeholders, board members, participants, all come together so that we could be an organization that was really at the cutting edge, that was saying, okay, and this was in July of 2020, so things were definitely not stable yet, but we knew that it was time and we couldn't wait to take action. So our progress, you can see here. So we definitely are really looking at our capacity. So what does that mean? And so what's interesting about PATH is because of our size, often what we're doing is reflective of the system as a whole. Because we're one of the largest homeless service providers. So, we're leaning in to those meetings, to those groups, to share what we've learned from our staff, what we learned from our participants. When we do a survey with our participants and you get thousands of responses back, that's like a USC evaluation, right? Yeah. Or UCLA if you're UCLA fans. But that's a significant amount of data. So we're really leaning into that and sharing that. And one of the things that continued to come up was capacity around our staff, right? How do we support our staff? A lot of this was because it was in 2020 and people had a lot of unknowns. They didn't know how, school wasn't in session. They didn't know if they were going to be able to maintain their job and maybe some of their other responsibilities. Parent care was big. It came up in our organization, taking care of maybe an older parent. So we really looked into what that meant and how do we provide really a stable foundation for all of our staff. And a lot of that was flexibility. So, the 9-to-5 job was kind of out the door before COVID for our organization because people don't have a crisis during 9 to 5. If they have a crisis at 10 o'clock, we're responding. If it's on the weekend, we're responding. But we were still locked into this mentality, right, of, okay, well, we're going to, keep the doors open 9 to 5. Well, we went to a completely flexible schedule that allowed people to continue to work, to do that child or older, parent care. And that really helped, I think, people not worry about the economic challenge that could have come. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback from our team on that. And I will say as a sector as a whole, I think it's moving that direction, recognizing I need people working on the weekends. I need people working at night. So we were able to do a lot of that work. Equity, so, this is huge. You're hearing this everywhere. And PATH started, we called it a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We started it actually in 2018, but in 2020, everything was hyper-focused with the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And we said, we have to look internally to make sure that we are equitable. That means a lot of different things. You know, it's not just racial equity, it's gender equity, it's age, it's, you know, making sure people feel like they have upward mobility, and what does that look like. So we've really kind of dove into that, and we started our own internal fellowship program we call the Path Academy. Again, our board was super supportive and gave the seed money for that to get started. And we had 25 individuals who were selected out of a group of 93 who applied to be part of this fellowship that's going to teach them. It actually launched in August of last year. So teaching them things like budgeting and, you know, why is grant writing important, and how do you even look for grants that might, you know, benefit our organization? How do you do advocacy? And it also has a mentorship component. So each of the pod members is paired with a PATH staff and a PATH board member. And it's been an amazing adventure this year. We're graduating, everyone's graduating in June, and we're launching our next cohort. But, you know, really looking at what are things that people are looking forward to at work? And how do we create this sense of community, especially in this what we call now hybrid world? Because part of our flexibility also was recognizing that not everybody has to go into the office at the same time every day. It actually wasn't safe for 2 years to do that. So we had to stagger, but we had to make sure the work got done. So we really worked on productivity as being our benchmark. So really making sure people were still doing the work, but they could maybe do it from home, or they could do it from a Starbucks or something like that. And then our last one is advocacy. So, you know, I think when I came to PATH, one of the things that I was so just enamored by was that everybody was so humble. You know, there wasn't a lot of sharing of, oh, we've hit this number, we've hit this number. And I think that was really powerful during the growth. What we've been told now by a lot of funders is, you're so big now, we need your voice out there, because you can really move the needle, and you have that data I was talking about that shows what works. So this was a shift for us, a shift for me too. You know, I had been running programs at the VA, and the VA kind of are maybe grandstanding a little bit in those roles, but PATH wasn't really doing that. And I think now what we've learned is it still feels good because it's rooted in evidence-based practices. So it's not, you know, sharing things just for the sake of sharing things. It's sharing things to make it better for our unhoused neighbors. So for the first time this year, we're co-sponsoring a bill, AB 1816 with the state, that will actually bring in more funding for the reentry population, which is the population that cycles through our jail system. So not major offenses, it could be drug offenses, it could be indecent exposure type of stuff, things that you might encounter while you're experiencing homelessness. And it's based off a model that we did in San Diego, and it's been so successful. It was a pilot program, but what we found was over 70% of the people that we're serving, once we got them into housing, they were actually able to stabilize on their own with no rental subsidy. So these folks were using the system, they were cycling in and out of jail, but once they received that mental health treatment, that substance use treatment, because it's a wraparound supportive team, and got into housing, that they were able to really thrive. So advocacy has taken a big turn. We now even have 2 staff that are working on advocacy statewide. I shared a little bit about that. So our racial equity plan, we are launching that actually in June. So we basically came up with a plan to just dive in, really be honest and look internally to make sure that we are really modeling what we're saying. So that plan will come out in June. And then I shared a lot about our policy. You can see here, this was actually pretty recent. What I've also found is by having a policy person, you get a lot more opportunities to be in front of electeds, because that's their full job. And it's been really, really helpful. The model I was talking to you about with the unarmed crisis response in LA City, I was meeting with the CAO's office around that, and around developing that, and around even if PATH isn't going to be the provider, but just what does our system need before it launched. So just having more of those meetings, developing those relationships, I think helps turn our system to be more responsive. And then let's see. Okay. So now I'm going to figure out how to share a video. So this is our PATH Metro Villas campus, and we just wanted to share because it's
I'm
amazing.
Jennifer Hark Dietz, honored to be the CEO of PATH.
I am so excited to welcome you to Path Metro Villas in Los Angeles. Path Metro Villas is a comprehensive community that ends homelessness for people's lives through affordable homes with health services and a range of on-site support aimed at helping people find stability and well-being. Our mission to end homelessness for individuals, families, and communities can only truly be accomplished by building more affordable housing and offering supportive services to help our participants thrive. This community is a testament to the power of Housing First, the proven effective approach that prioritizes providing people with safe, stable homes. The support services at Path Metro Villas end homelessness for our residents, and our wraparound services support their ongoing physical and mental health needs, ensuring that they are able to reach their goals. Phase 1 of Path Metro Villas was completed in the summer of 2019 and includes 65 units, including units for veterans. Path Metro Villas is also home to our administrative offices for so many of our Path staff in Los Angeles. I love working out of this space because I'm able to see and engage so many staff from so many different programs. Path Metro Villas Phase 2 was impacted by the pandemic, but we were still able to open in July of 2020, a true testament to the dedication of our staff and community partners. This recent expansion allowed us to build 122 more units made up of studio and one-bedroom apartments. But these 187 apartments are so much more than just units. They are safe and beautiful homes for people who are no longer experiencing homelessness. On-site amenities include community rooms, laundry facilities, a terrace garden, and landscape courtyards where tenants can relax and enjoy the fresh air. Check out our beautiful amenities that truly make this a thriving community. We couldn't do this work alone, and we wouldn't be able to build and support this beautiful community without the help of so many of you. We all play a role in ending homelessness. And I want to thank everyone from our board of directors, our generous donors, our financial and development partners, our volunteers, elected officials, and of course our Essential Path team members for making our vision of a world where everyone has a home come true. Because of you, that vision is a reality here at Path Metro Villas.
On October the 22nd is when I came to Pat, and since I've been here with Pat, it has tremendously helped me, nothing but help me. When I came here, I didn't have anything. I had one sheet I was sleeping up under, and Brittany was so sweet, they went out and got me the blanket that's on my bed, the pillows and everything, and I thank her so much for it. And I broke down and cried when she gave it to me because I was like, oh, this place has made me happy because I can just come in and have that peace of mind, that joy, that I can get up and make a toast if I want to, or I can get up and make a cup of coffee if I want to. I couldn't do that out there. I've been homeless for maybe, 7 or 8 times. There was times when I'm like, nobody cares. They don't care, I don't care. If you help yourself, then someone else will help you as bad as you want it. Every day I was doing something to better myself, to get my own place. You put your mind to it, it's going to happen. You got to work at it. With the help of people here, I'm doing better and better. They help me with seeing that I'm okay, medication-wise, clothing. If I need food, it's there. If I need to save some money and stuff, I can go to them and ask them to help me with funds. I really love it. I can't thank you guys enough how much how much I appreciate this. I won't look back ever.
To learn more about PATH and support our mission to end homelessness, go to www.epath.org today. Thank you for your incredible support. You are truly making a difference in the lives of those most in need in our community. So that is one of our newest sites and our biggest one.
Great job.
the campus, I mean, it was a vision for so long, right? So it's so exciting, but it shows it takes a full village, to make that all come together. So definitely wanted to highlight that. And then let's see if we can go out of there. Okay. This is another story. So I think it's important that we know, right, the people that are behind this, right? We can talk a lot about systems change and advocacy, but it's ultimately about our neighbors. And so, sometimes it's just the excitement, right, of moving in. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. Sometimes it's quick. But I think for me, it's just a reminder that each situation is unique. And so our system has to be flexible. And that can be really hard when you're talking about such a big system. But yeah, so we have a lot of these stories. And our team loves these stories too, because it's their work together, right? It's a partnership is what we talk about with our unhoused neighbors. And so it's important really that we kind of commemorate that celebration. Okay, there we go. So different things, different ways to get involved. We always share this. There's lots of you all just being here and listening and learning. I mean, already shows how interested you are and how much a part of the solution you are. We had an amazing event last night, and we did a panel, and one of our team members, yes, thank you for joining us. We did a panel, and one of the team members, he hadn't been working in homeless services. He'd been working more in human rights, and he's been with us now for almost a year and a half. And he said, when we started talking, he said, so much of this starts around like a dinner table, that conversation. And so one of his things he shared during the panel last night was just how to have that conversation and how to demystify homelessness and talk about it as the complexity that it is, but not shamefully. So just by you guys all being here, I appreciate you being part of that. So obviously there's ways to give time through volunteers, give voice, even sharing on our social. So the team has reached their official influencers now. They have their blue check mark on Instagram and Facebook, which they were very excited about. So at Path Partners, you can follow us along, but it means that we're reaching a larger audience. So sharing on social is really critical, just kind of to get the word out in a really kind of, it's super easy to share. And then of course, if there's items, it's often needs to be organized, and I say that only because we used to have this amazing warehouse where we could kind of collect everything and then disperse, and then that amazing warehouse became 122 affordable homes, so we now don't have a lot of storage space, but we definitely, our outreach teams put hygiene kits out, welcome home kits when someone moves in. You heard that she was sharing, the blankets and stuff. That's all through volunteers. Could be corporate volunteers, faith-based volunteers, but we couldn't do it without our volunteers. And then we're serving a lot of families. So we're starting to see a much bigger need for baby items. So if you hear something, we can always connect you. We have a lead in Los Angeles that handles all of this. And we just actually brought on someone for support for her because it's just grown so much, but it's a big part of our work. Actually, I might skip that video because it's about why we volunteer. And then of course, for folks that donate, we just like to talk about what the donation means. You can say like, oh, I'm gonna give $100, but what does that donation actually do? So we've been working to just break that down. About $1,000 helps to furnish a home, groceries for a month for a family. Then we have counseling, case management, transportation. So we provide a lot of Metro cards for folks so that they can get to and from appointments. And then of course, essential hygiene items. So if you have donated before, or you have somebody who's donated, those are just some of the ways that the costs are broken down. And that's it for me. And of course, unless there's additional questions, it was just wonderful to present, or something that you're like, I thought you might cover this. I can probably talk about most things, so I'm more than happy. Yeah.
You mentioned that PATH is doing more advocacy now and has more policy focused. Could you just maybe speak a little more about, because there's been some big bonds that have passed, and so there has been money set aside. I know there's been some frustration about deploying it. You've already made reference to that. But how is the state doing, the county doing, the city doing at taking the funds that have been set aside to sort of deal with the systemic issues that are causing homelessness to actually be increased?
Yeah, I'll start at the state and then we'll work in. So the state, for the first time ever, though, in the last couple of years, has had dedicated homeless service funding. And the proposal that the governor did just in 2 years of unprecedented funding, much of it going to what is called Project Home Key. So Project Home Key came out as a really innovative model to buy underutilized hotels, motels throughout the state and use them either as interim housing at first and then convert, or go directly to a permanent housing conversion. So that was really great. You know, it was kind of a win-win. A lot of motel owners, the tourism was down. So we're almost into Home Key round 3 now. So there's round 1, then we're currently in the middle of round 2, and then round 3 will open this summer. We personally saw that benefit. We have a site in Hollywood that they had zoned as an apartment complex. However, they were using it as a motel. So when COVID happened, they stopped renting it because they were, nervous about bringing the virus inside. So we purchased the site with funding and partnership of LA City, funding from the state, and we were able to lease up 40 individuals. It's a smaller site right off of Hollywood and Vine. It's an incredible location. And all of that took 6 months. That is unheard of. Our West Carson site, which is not done through Home Key, I'm just giving an example. We were doing community engagement in 2018, so we had purchased the site in 2018. It just broke ground this year, 2022. And that's using more conventional affordable housing financing, like tax credits, you might have heard of. So that we think is definitely the bright light of COVID. Like, let's figure out ways to continue to do this faster. We have another site that was purchased with the city and the housing authority that we'll be providing 80 homes to. It'll go directly to permanent housing, is through Home Key 2.0. We have a couple other sites too that are running interim first. But those are the type of things we need to be doing, not just because of the pandemic, but because homelessness is a crisis itself. So that's a lot of the advocacy we talk about, is we need ongoing funding. Every year, we cannot do these pilots. I mean, pilots are great and they help with innovation, but that can't be the only way that the state is giving money. So there's actually a bill right now to do 5% of the general fund that would go to homeless funding. Historically, it's been 3% in the last few years, before that even less. But that would allow us to just sustain and increase, right? We need that ability. Now locally, so we have the county, there was a measure passed, Measure H in 2016. That number I shared, where 207 people are exiting homelessness every day, but 227, if we didn't have Measure H, my guess is it'd be closer to about 50 people exiting homeless every day. So while there's a lot of criticism, it has done wonders. And you can see the charts when you look at the homeless count, which is a good idea. I should add that in next time. But you can really see what was happening before Measure H, which was not a lot of rental subsidies, mostly from the federal government, either for veterans or maybe families. So it really allowed us to be more flexible locally. And then at LA City, they definitely get state funding. They're actually doing a lot more outreach. So a lot of the council districts are working on outreach programs individually, which is a little bit complex because it can be different then, again, by that jurisdiction. But it does show that they're willing to put their discretionary funds in to help people get linked to the system. So there's definitely a lot happening. On the permanent housing side with Prop H, it's been in the paper a lot. That's a lot of the ones you mentioned, that the unit cost is high. I think a lot of advocacy that we could all be doing is, how do we waive fees for affordable housing? We have one site, I think it's Hollywood Con, that I think our plumbing alone to the street was like $1 million. Now we might have to do some of that plumbing, but what percentage is fees? So our team says anywhere from 5 to 6% is just fees to the city. So maybe they could waive that. There's some innovation there. Maybe reinvest that money into affordable housing. It does change by political will, I will say, but I think that what we're seeing is that it's important to get in front of folks so that you can share what really works and why we're held up. Why is the cost going to $700,000? Gratefully, ours are not that high. We're hovering around $500,000, but still, when you do a community meeting and they ask that question and they say, well, my son can't buy a place for $500,000, or I bought my house for less than $500,000. It's a very difficult discussion, and they're right. It's a lot of money. So how do we reduce that cost and timelines? And I think it's definitely needs more advocacy. It's number one focus on our end. So it's really for us, it's that housing pipeline and then the service pipeline. So everything we're doing is really pushing both of those to be at the forefront.
This was just a wonderful presentation. I can't believe the range of things you all are doing, and it's just really,
Thank you.
really wonderful. But I was so glad you had the slide about what can you do. I guess I'd like to ask that on a kind of a larger basis. Clearly, there are lots of gaps that PATH can't fill. And I just wonder, we're here at the birthplace in PATH. What could our church do to help, to kind of look at some of those gaps? What are the gaps that you all just can't get to, that there are no other entities that, where others fear to tread?
Yeah.
So I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
I think that one of the great things is you all are bringing this real, crisis of our time to light. So I think it is talking about it. It's saying yes when you have an apartment that might be going up by you or by a friend. The church does a ton, often lots of donations, hygiene supplies, lunches have, amazing. In terms of gaps too, I think what we're really trying to do is get the voice out there to all our supporters. So our newsletter has things like join us in this advocacy, because you might have relationships, right, that we don't necessarily have. And I think we're trying to do better at that, asking folks like, you might have a friend that's in the city council. How do we get in front of folks to really share our voice, share what we know works? And then I know with Mark's situation, and we've been talking a lot, how do we bring the need for mental health services to light? So that's a lot of what we're thinking about. And I'll say with PATH, we are not like a mental health provider per se. We do a lot of mental health because we're the first responders. And we have mental health clinicians in some programs. But I think raising that up, that it really needs to be available more naturally, not always with a crisis, but how do we get preventative services in, proactive services? I think that's something we've been thinking about a lot too. And you all have such a, he's doing such a great job with the advocacy. You all have such a beautiful way to just share that this is a true need. And when I share some of the stories of people who've made it home, that's why it's so important.
That's right. People have to see homeless people as just us one salary away from the street. For so many of us and our children who are paying off college debt. I mean, we have these PhD kids who can't get a job and have to pay enormous amounts of money. I worry about them. My own children are okay because they're working damn hard, but I know a lot of people are that. We have to be able to see the homeless as people, not as the homeless. And anybody who has connections to, as you said, the internet, or anything that's still in print, to write and interview and know individual people. The woman you showed who was so proud of her wonderful apartment, she is somebody I'd like to see on the front page of everything, or on that morning show on Spectrum that does the LA Times. Unless we know that these are people, we're not going to be caring about helping them. They're just going to be refuse or something we stumble over.
Yeah. And you saying that is so much more powerful than me saying that. Because I'm the CEO of a homeless service agency. You, right, are a community member. And so sometimes that voice needs to be elevated. I mean, not to say that folks don't listen, right? They definitely listen, but your voice, and you did it so eloquently, is so powerful. So I want you all to take that away, that you being part of that solution is really critical. I saw a couple more hands.
Just one thing to mention with the mayor's race, that's going to be the top issue that's going to be thrown around here. So we're going to actually be escalating the profile of this issue.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% accurate. And I think, with Mayor Garcetti, we really had a partner on this issue. And it's going to be really important for us that we don't slide in a different direction.
But we don't want to punish people and chastise them.
Right.
Just preventive-wise, like you had mentioned at the very beginning, the eviction moratorium is going to be ending. I also believe the current moratorium on rent filling up and renting people apartments is gonna be, I think, any efforts that are going on specifically that we might be able to really promote, push, support?
Yeah, so there's a big effort. It's called problem solving. It's an interesting name, but that effort is trying to get to folks who are rent burdened or are worried about that moratorium ending. I think what's really concerning for those of us that work in the field is it is hard to find the resources. You know, when LA County or LA City had the rental support, you know, they blasted out on their channels, but people aren't always looking. They're not always reading it, you know. I always think of too, like by the time sometimes someone has become homeless, especially when I worked at the VA, they may not have even recognized all the benefits they were eligible for because they were just surviving. So I think it's going to be really important that we do share that and that we continue to find ways to fund it, because I think as they end, we're going to start to see what that need really is. We're working closely, and the sector is trying to work closely with the court system so that as evictions start to, you know, come across the courts too, that we're trying to be a little bit more preventative, because sometimes we don't find out until then. So I think it's a big thing that we need to figure out how to share more broadly, you know, on billboards, on buses, on, you know, everywhere, so that it becomes kind of a household, like, are you in trouble?
Yeah, that's a really good idea. We have, somebody talks about somebody who's in trouble, and immediately everybody's got this is the suicide hotline, but is there a homeless hotline that you can call?
Right. There is a resource, so if you are encountering someone, there's a resource that's called LA HOP, LA-HOP, and it's actually an outreach resource, so it's online. You can do it on your phone, or you can actually identify if it's mostly for folks who are experiencing street homelessness, but you can do that where you can go in and you can enter like the coordinates, corner of Wilshire or something, and I'm concerned about this person, and an outreach team will come within 72 hours, which isn't always fast enough, but it's definitely, you know, a start. And then if you have somebody in need, so 211, it has a variety of different resources, but it's a great place to start if someone has kind of a, you know, a rent burden, a food scarcity issue. They can connect you to a variety of folks. But thank you. It sounds like, yes, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you all, and great questions.
I'm so grateful that you came today.
Thank
the
you.
opportunities for helping are endless, so hopefully we can take this to heart. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.